An Olympic superstar withdraws from the Games in Tokyo. Gymnast Simone Biles next week's individual events. Biles is one of a growing number of professional athletes to recently bring attention to the mental stress associated with high-performance athletics. And joining us to dig deeper into this are Linda Ransdell, the new dean of Northern Illinois University's College of Health and Human Services. Ransdell has studied elite women athletes for years. And sports therapist Natalie Graves, whose practice specializes in the mental health of athletes from the Olympic and professional levels to college and youth levels. And we welcome both of you to Chicago tonight.
Thank you for having us.
First, Natalie Graves, your reaction to Biles's performance and then her subsequent withdrawal.
My first impression with the performance actually started at the trials when I noticed she was not performing as she normally does, and she didn't have for her standards, she didn't have a great performance. So that's when she became on my radar. And fast forward to the games, I think it just was a combination of what was already going on with her, but it was definitely the pressure and the expectations.
If they have too much stress, it's typically because they put pressure on themselves to be, exceptional at all times. There is the social media aspect of it. There's the fact that they're on the news 24/7, and there's this thing called fear of failure. And athletes are not used to it, and they don't deal with it well at any level. So I think, that probably what happened is, the level of stress and the competition, and maybe she wasn't feeling, like she normally does at that level of competition. So, I think it happens to athletes, unfortunately, on occasion.
And as we said, because of the nature of gymnastics, that could put her at great physical risk. Natalie Graves, given all these factors, is it typical for a team like USA Gymnastics to have a mental health professional on staff to help coach athletes through this?
Well, we would hope so. It's really imperative that we begin to have these mental health professionals already in place, already on staff to provide the support before something happens with the athletes. Because once something happens, oftentimes it's hard to reverse course. And we're seeing that struggle with Simone Biles right now.
And let's not forget, among all the factors here, USA Gymnastics, women's gymnastics, has been in the midst of a scandal, a firestorm with the former team physician Larry Nassar, and Simone Biles herself said she was sexually assaulted by him. How big a factor does that play into the mental state, at least of these women athletes right now?
Well, it's a big factor being a survivor of sexual abuse. Now, obviously, she has overcome a lot on the floor where she's excelled exceptionally, but that doesn't mean she's not impacted by it. So we really need to understand that, but also, just as any one of us, we can have mental health struggles. 1 in 4 people in any given year will suffer from a mental illness. That could be depression, anxiety. So we have to stop treating this like this is some taboo, this strange thing that occurs. It's actually very, very common. And when you're a high profile athlete, the pressure is that much more and the expectations are so much higher. And so it's really hard when something comes in that may disrupt your training or your daily functioning. It makes it that much harder to get back on track when the whole world is watching.
And something
and
like
remember,
COVID.
She's only 24 years old.
Right, she's very young. Also young, Linda Ransdell, is the tennis superstar Naomi Osaka, who pulled out of the French Open and then Wimbledon, citing mental health concerns. I mean, it gets a predictable reaction. Some people criticize it, want to pile on. Others feel it's a positive thing. What impact does it have to have these high-pro athletes openly talking about this?
Beings do experience failure. They do have to get back on their feet when things don't go the way that they want them to go. And I think that the admission of the mental health challenges that these athletes have, because they train so hard, so many hours a day, they're isolated in many cases, and particularly with COVID, It's a different set of circumstances that I don't think many of us can understand.
And Linda, you mentioned the factors earlier, social media, where people are not their best selves on social media, and they'll criticize and they'll try to score points by making fun or trolling. Are athletes under more pressure now, given just kind of the state of society, than they were maybe 10, 20 years ago?
I think so. I think that there are a lot of things that go on now that didn't go on pre-social media, pre-Facebook, pre-Twitter. And so we have to be mindful of that. And I also think that people will do and say things on social media that they might not do and say to a person's face. And that's unfortunate.
I think that's universally true. That's what we see on social media a lot. All right, interesting discussion. Our thanks to Linda Ransdell and Natalie Graves for joining us. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having us.
You bet.